Captain Marcus Rivera stood on the bridge of the Terran exploration vessel Iron Dawn, watching the stars drift past through the main viewport. His ship had been patrolling the outer edge of human space for 3 months now, searching for signs of intelligent life beyond Earth. So far, they had found nothing but empty worlds and silent space. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and life support systems. His crew worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. Communications officer Elena Vasquez monitored radio frequencies from dozens of different worlds. Navigation officer James Cross kept the ship on course through the dangerous asteroid fields that filled this region of space. Chief Engineer Robert Kane made sure their engines ran smoothly despite being months away from any repair facility. Rivera had served in the Terran Navy for 20 years, but this mission felt different. Humanity had developed faster than light travel only 5 years ago, and they were still learning what lay beyond their small corner of the galaxy. Every day brought new discoveries, but also new questions about whether they were truly alone. Captain was reviewing daily reports when Elena suddenly sat up straighter at her station. Her fingers flew across her control panel as she adjusted frequency settings and boosted signal strength. The look on her face made Rivera walk over to her station. "What do you have, Elena?" he asked. "Sir, I'm picking up something strange," she replied, not taking her eyes off her screens. "It's definitely artificial, but it's not from any human ship. The signal is weak and breaking up, but it's clearly a distress call." Rivera felt his heart rate increase. This could be humanity's first contact with alien intelligence. "Can you clean it up?" Elena worked her controls for several minutes, applying filters and signal enhancement protocols. Slowly, voices began to emerge from the static. They spoke in a language no human had ever heard, but the terror in their voices was unmistakable. "Computer, run translation protocols," Rivera ordered. The ship's artificial intelligence began analyzing the alien speech patterns, looking for mathematical relationships and common concepts that might provide clues to meaning. After 10 minutes of processing, words began appearing on Elena's screen. "Help us," the translation read. "The Devourers have come. Our worlds are dying. They consume everything in their path. Millions are dead. Billions more will follow." The transmission continued, filled with descriptions of massive ships that appeared without warning and stripped entire planets of all life. The aliens spoke of weapons that could crack open moons and technology that turned living beings into fuel for their machines. "If anyone receives this message," the voice continued, "do not come to these coordinates. The Devourers are too powerful. No force in the galaxy can stop them. Save yourselves while you still can." More coordinates followed, along with desperate pleas for someone, anyone, to remember their civilization after it was gone. The aliens described themselves as the Kalari, a peaceful species that had lived on 7 worlds for thousands of years. Now only one world remained, and it was under siege. "They are coming for us now," the final message said. "Their ships block out our sun. The ground shakes with their landing craft. To whoever finds this recording, learn from our mistakes. The Devourers cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be bargained with. They exist only to consume. Do not let them find your worlds. Do not let them find—" The transmission cut to static. The bridge fell silent. Rivera stared at the coordinates displayed on Elena's screen. According to their star charts, the location was 3 days away at maximum speed. The captain looked around at his crew and saw the same mixture of fear and determination in their eyes that he felt in his own chest. James Cross was the first to speak. "Sir, those coordinates are in the Kepler 4I42 system. Long-range sensors show no signs of inhabited worlds there." "Because there might not be any left," Elena said quietly. "Robert." Kane pulled up engineering displays on his console. "Iron Dawn is an exploration vessel, Captain. We have basic defensive systems, but nothing that could handle the kind of threat these aliens described." Rivera nodded. Everything Kane said was true. The Iron Dawn carried only light weapons and minimal armor. It was designed for scientific research, not combat. But the distress call had been clear about one thing. An entire civilization was being destroyed, and humanity might be the only species in range to help. Elena, send a message. Back to Earth Command, Rivera ordered. Include everything we've recorded and our intended course of action. Make sure they understand this is a first contact situation with potentially hostile aliens. Yes, sir, Elena replied, immediately beginning to compose the transmission. Rivera turned to address his entire crew. I know what you're all thinking. We're one small ship heading towards something that destroyed an entire star system. But we took an oath when we joined the Terran Navy. We swore to protect human interests and to uphold the values of our civilization. That includes helping those who call for aid. The captain paused, looking each crew member in the eye. However, I won't order anyone to follow me into what might be a suicide mission. Anyone who wants to request transfer to another assignment can do so without penalty. Not one person on the bridge moved. Very well, Rivera said. James, plot a course for the Kepler 442 system. Maximum speed. Course plotted and laid in, sir, Cross replied. Elena, keep monitoring for any additional transmissions. I want to know the moment you pick up anything. Already on it, Captain. As the Iron Dawn changed course and jumped to faster than light, speed, Rivera couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a threshold. Humanity had spent so long wondering if they were alone in the universe. Now, they knew the answer, and it was terrifying. The aliens had called their enemies the Devourers, beings that consumed entire worlds and left nothing behind. Rivera had read enough military history to know that such an enemy would eventually find Earth. Whether that happened in years or decades didn't matter. What mattered was learning everything they could about this threat, while there was still time. 3 days later, the Iron Dawn would arrive at coordinates that should have contained a thriving star system. Instead, they would find something that would change humanity's understanding of their place in the galaxy forever. But for now, Rivera stood on his bridge and watched the stars streak past, carrying his ship and crew toward their destiny. Behind them, Elena's transmission raced toward Earth at the speed of light, carrying news that would mobilize every military force humanity could muster. But that response was still weeks away. For now, 37 humans aboard one small ship were all that stood between the Devourers and the unknown civilizations that might still be fighting for survival. The hunt had begun. The Iron Dawn dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and immediately every alarm on the ship began to sound. Captain Rivera rushed to the main viewer, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Where 7 planets should have been orbiting a yellow star, there was nothing but debris. Massive chunks of rock and metal drifted through space in loose clouds that stretched across millions of kilometers. The star itself still burned, but it was the only thing left intact in the entire system. Elena, are you getting any life signs? Rivera asked. Communications officer Elena Vasquez worked frantically at her station, scanning every frequency for signs of survivors. Nothing, Captain. No radio signals, no energy signatures, no emergency beacons. It's completely dead. Chief Science Officer Dr. Amara Okafor moved to her analysis station and began scanning the debris fields with the ship's powerful sensors. What she found made her hands shake as she typed her report. Captain, she said, her voice barely steady, these aren't just pieces of destroyed planets. I'm reading organic compounds mixed in with the rock and metal. Billions of different life forms, all broken down to their basic elements. Rivera felt sick. The debris clouds weren't just the remains of worlds. They were the remains of entire civilizations, reduced to cosmic dust and scattered across space. The scale of destruction was beyond anything in human history. How long ago did this happen? He asked. Dr. Okafor continued her scans. Based on the dispersal patterns and radiation decay, I'd estimate 2 to 3 weeks. This was recent, Captain. Very recent. Navigation Officer James Cross looked up from his station. Sir, I'm detecting some larger objects hidden in the asteroid field. They're metallic and showing signs of artificial construction. Rivera's tactical training kicked in. Red alert! Raise shields and power weapons. James, put us on a course that keeps the debris field between us and those objects. The Iron. Dawn moved carefully through the scattered remains of the Kalari civilization. Captain Rivera ordered all hands to battle stations, but he knew their small exploration vessel would be helpless against whatever force could destroy 7 planets. As they got closer to the metallic objects, their true size became apparent. Each one was larger than Earth's moon, built from dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange geometric patterns covered their surfaces, and massive weapon ports gaped like hungry mouths. "Captain," Elena said, her voice tight with fear, "I'm picking up energy signatures from those ships. They're not dead. Something's still active inside them." Before Rivera could respond, the space around the Iron Dawn lit up with scanning beams. The alien vessels had detected them. Dr. Okafor's instruments went crazy as the scans penetrated their shields and analyzed every system on their ship. "They're taking detailed readings of our entire vessel, Captain. Hull composition, power systems, crew life signs, everything. Can we jam their scans?" "I'm trying. But their technology is far more advanced than ours. It's like trying to stop an ocean with a paper cup." The scanning lasted for several minutes, then suddenly stopped. In the silence that followed, Rivera could hear his own heartbeat. Then Elena's board lit up with an incoming transmission. "Captain, they're trying to communicate with us. The signal is being translated automatically." "Put it through," Rivera ordered. A voice filled the bridge, cold and mechanical, speaking perfect English with no emotion whatsoever. "Biological entities of vessel designation unknown. You will identify your species and homeworld for cataloging purposes." Rivera activated the communication system. "This is Captain Marcus Rivera of the Terran exploration vessel Iron Dawn. We received a distress signal from this system and came to offer assistance." There was a pause before the mechanical voice responded. "Species designation. Human. Homeworld. Designation. Earth. Analyzing planetary data from your vessel's navigation systems." Dr. Okafor worked frantically at her station. "Captain, they're accessing our computer systems. I can't stop them." "Impossible," the alien voice said, and for the first time it showed something like emotion. Confusion. "Homeworld environmental. Conditions are incompatible with biological life. Average temperature variance exceeds survival parameters for known species by factor of 12. Radiation levels exceed lethal thresholds. Atmospheric composition includes toxic gases. Geological. Instability creates constant seismic events. Weather patterns include destructive phenomena classified as catastrophic." Rivera exchanged glances with his crew. The aliens were describing Earth, but they seemed unable to understand how life could exist there. "Furthermore," the voice continued, "analysis indicates presence of multiple apex predator species on homeworld surface. Biological warfare between competing life forms appears to be standard environmental condition. Conclusion: data must be corrupted. No sapient species could evolve under such conditions." Dr. Okafor looked up from her console. "Captain, I think they're having trouble believing that Earth is actually our homeworld. To them, our planet looks like a death trap." The alien voice spoke again, and this time Rivera could hear something new in its tone: curiosity. "Species human will be preserved for detailed study. Your unique adaptation to hostile environmental conditions requires investigation. Prepare for boarding and specimen collection." Massive tractor beams reached out from the nearest alien vessel and locked onto the Iron Dawn. Despite full power to engines, the human ship was drawn steadily toward the waiting docking bay. "Captain," Elena said urgently, "I'm getting a narrow beam. Transmission window. If I route power from life support, I can send one message back to Earth before we're taken aboard. Rivera didn't hesitate. Do it. Send everything we've recorded along with our location coordinates. Add a priority military alert. First contact with hostile aliens capable of destroying entire star systems. Elena's fingers flew across her controls as the Iron Dawn was pulled into the alien ship. The message burst toward Earth at light speed, carrying news that would change human civilization forever. But that help was still weeks away. As the docking bay doors closed around them, Rivera gathered his crew. Listen carefully, everyone. We're about to become humanity's first prisoners of war with an alien species. Our job now is to survive long enough to learn everything we can about these creatures. Every piece of information we gather might save Earth someday. The ship shuddered as alien machinery locked onto their hull. Through the viewports, Rivera could see massive robotic forms moving toward their airlock. Whatever these creatures were, they had just made a critical mistake. They assumed humans were like every other species they had encountered, soft, predictable, and easily broken. They were about to learn why Earth was considered a death world, and why the humans who survived it were unlike anything else in the galaxy. 3 weeks after the Iron Dawn vanished, Admiral Rachel Thompson sat in the emergency briefing room at Earth Defense Command, staring at the data that would change everything. The message from Captain Rivera had arrived only hours ago, but its contents had already mobilized every military leader on the planet. Ladies and gentlemen, Thompson addressed the assembled commanders, we are facing the greatest threat in human history. What you're about to see represents our first contact with alien intelligence, and they are actively hostile. The main screen showed images from the Iron Dawn's sensors, the debris fields that had once been inhabited worlds, the massive alien vessels, and the translated communications that revealed the true scope of the enemy. General Harrison Webb, head of the Terran, Marine Corps, leaned forward in his chair. Admiral, these recordings show destruction on a scale we've never imagined. 7 entire planets reduced to rubble. How do we fight something like that? Thompson activated another display showing Earth's current military assets. We do what? Humans have always done when faced with impossible odds. We adapt, we improvise, and we refuse to give up. Dr. Lisa Park, the chief military scientist, stood and moved to the tactical display. The aliens called themselves the Hive Collective in their communications with Captain Rivera. Our analysis suggests there's some form of machine intelligence, possibly organic beings who uploaded their consciousness into artificial bodies millions of years ago. What's their goal? Asked Colonel Blake Harrison, commander of the Terran Fighter Corps. Total consumption, Dr. Park replied grimly. They strip entire star systems of all matter and energy, converting everything into raw materials for their expanding fleet. They've been doing this for so long that they view it as the natural order of the universe. Admiral Thompson brought up star charts showing human space and the surrounding regions. Intelligence estimates suggest the Hive has destroyed over 200 civilizations in the past 1,000 years. They follow a predictable pattern, scout the target system, analyze all life forms, then systematically consume everything. What makes them so dangerous? General Webb asked. Superior numbers, advanced technology, and complete ruthlessness, Thompson answered. But they have one weakness. According to Rivera's recordings, they're having trouble understanding humans. Our home planet doesn't fit their models of where intelligent life can develop. Dr. Park activated a new display showing Earth's environmental data. To most alien species, Earth would be classified as a death world. Extreme weather, dangerous radiation, aggressive life forms, constant geological activity. The Hive's analysis suggests they've never encountered a species that evolved under such hostile conditions. Colonel Harrison smiled grimly. You're saying they don't know what they're dealing with? Exactly, Thompson replied. Every other species they've encountered developed on stable, predictable worlds. They expect their enemies to be logical, organized, and limited by the same environmental factors that constrained their evolution. General Webb studied the tactical data. How long do we have before they reach Earth? Based on their current expansion pattern, 18 months at most, Dr. Park answered. But if they decide humans are a significant threat, they could be here much sooner. Thompson stood and activated the final display, a fleet composition showing every ship Earth could muster. This is why I've called you all here. We're going to give the Hive Collective something they've never faced before, a Deathworld species fighting for its survival. The display showed hundreds of ships of every class, from massive dreadnoughts to small fighter craft. But the most interesting vessels were marked as Project Deathworld, experimental ships built in secret over the past 5 years. These new vessels, Thompson explained, were designed specifically for combat in extreme environments. They can operate in radioactive fields that would kill normal crews, fight in asteroid belts that would tear apart conventional ships, and continue functioning with damage that would cripple any other vessel. Dr. Park highlighted the technical specifications. We've also developed new tactical doctrines based on Earth's environmental conditions. Instead of fighting like civilized species seeking order and predictability, we'll fight like humans, turning chaos into our advantage. Colonel Harrison examined the fighter deployment plans. You want us to treat space combat like surviving a natural disaster? Precisely, Thompson replied. Hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, these are normal conditions on Earth. We've spent millions of years learning to thrive in chaos while other species were learning to avoid it. General Webb nodded slowly. The Hive expects logical, predictable tactics. We give them the opposite. The plan is called Operation Prometheus, Thompson continued. We mobilize every available ship and crew, not to meet the Hive in conventional battle, but to demonstrate why humans are the ultimate survivors. Dr. Park brought up biological data from the Iron Dawn's crew. The Hive is fascinated by human physiology. We can survive injuries that would be fatal to most species, operate under stress levels that would break other minds, and continue fighting long after logic says we should give up. They're about to learn why, Thompson said. Every human on those ships will be fighting not just for Earth, but for every species the Hive has destroyed and every civilization they plan to consume. The briefing continued for hours as the commanders planned humanity's response. Fleet movements, supply lines, communication protocols, and battle strategies were all designed around one central concept: show the Hive that humans were unlike anything they had encountered before. As the meeting concluded, Admiral Thompson looked around the room at the officers who would lead humanity's first interstellar war. In 18 hours, Task Force Prometheus departs for Hive space. We're going to rescue Captain Rivera and his crew, and we're going to send a message to the Hive Collective that humanity will not go quietly into extinction. General Webb stood and saluted. Admiral, we've been waiting our entire careers for a fight worthy of our species. The Hive is about to discover why Earth breeds warriors. 3 days later, the largest fleet in human history departed Earth's solar system. 600 ships carrying the finest crews humanity could produce, all heading toward an enemy that had never known defeat. But hidden in the asteroid fields and deep space installations, even more ships were being built. Earth's industrial capacity was being converted entirely to war production. The message from the Iron Dawn had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping since they first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. Now they knew, and they were ready to fight for their place in the galaxy. The Hive Collective was about to learn why evolution had forged humans on a death world, and why that made them the most dangerous species in the universe. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Hive territory with what could only be described as controlled chaos. 600 ships emerged from faster-than-light travel, not in neat formation, but scattered across a volume of space that would have horrified military tacticians from any other species. To the watching Hive sensors, it looked like the humans had made a terrible mistake. They were wrong. Admiral Thompson stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Unbreakable, watching as her fleet spread out according to the new battle doctrine developed, specifically for fighting the Hive. Around her, the command crew worked with the kind of focused intensity that came from knowing they were fighting for their species' survival. "Admiral," reported Communications Officer David Miller, "we're receiving challenge signals from 17 Hive vessels. They're demanding we identify ourselves and state our purpose." Thompson smiled grimly. "Send them this message. This is Admiral Rachel Thompson of the Terran Federation Navy. We've come for our people, and we're here to tell you that your expansion ends now." The response came quickly, transmitted in the same cold, mechanical voice that Captain Rivera had heard weeks ago. "Species human. Your vessels will be catalogued and consumed. Resistance is futile. Your technological limitations make victory impossible." "Let's see about that," Thompson muttered. "Signal all ships. Operation Deathworld is now active." Across the scattered human fleet, crews received the signal they had trained for. Instead of moving into standard battle formations, the ships began to behave like a school of fish avoiding a predator. Destroyers wove between asteroids with impossible grace. Cruisers used gravitational fields to slingshot around debris, building speed for attack runs. Fighters moved in chaotic swarms that somehow maintained perfect coordination. Captain Lisa Park commanded the destroyer Storm Rider as it danced through an asteroid field while being chased by a Hive pursuit vessel 3 times its size. Her crew worked with mechanical precision, but their movements followed patterns born from millions of years of evolution on a world that tried to kill everything living on it. "Incoming plasma burst, port side," called out Tactical Officer Alex. "Turner." "Hard to starboard, dive 30 degrees, Park ordered, her hands steady on the controls as chunks of asteroid exploded around them. The Storm Rider slipped between two massive rocks with meters to spare, while the Hive ship's larger bulk forced it to go around. "They're having trouble following us," Turner reported. "Their navigation systems keep losing lock when we move into the debris field." Park nodded. The Hive ships were built for space combat in open areas where their superior firepower and armor could dominate, but humans had learned to fight in 3 dimensions while dodging falling rocks and unpredictable weather. To them, an asteroid field was just another obstacle course. "Target their primary weapon array," Park ordered. "Fire when ready." The Storm Rider's missiles streaked out, weaving between asteroids to strike the Hive vessel's main guns. The alien ship returned fire, but its weapons were designed for long-range combat against enemies who fought in predictable patterns. The human destroyer was already somewhere else, moving like a sparrow, avoiding a hawk. Meanwhile, Commander Blake Harrison led his fighter squadron through a maneuver that would have been impossible for pilots from any other world. His ships dove toward a Hive cruiser at maximum speed, pulling up at the last second to rake its hull with concentrated fire before scattering in 12 different directions. "This is incredible," Harrison called over the radio to his pilots. "They can't track us when we move like this. It's like they've never seen evasive flying before." The truth was exactly that. Every species the Hive had encountered fought in ordered formations, with predictable tactics designed to minimize risk and maximize efficiency. But humans had learned to fight like their homeworld had taught them, accepting danger as normal and turning chaos into opportunity. The Hive fleet began to respond with increasing desperation. Their logical algorithms couldn't process human tactics that seemed to have no pattern or structure. Ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Crews that should have surrendered after taking critical damage continued their attacks. Aboard, the Hive flagship, the collective consciousness that commanded their forces, was experiencing something new: confusion. For millions of years, they had fought according to established patterns. Enemy ships moved in formation, damaged vessels retreated, inferior forces surrendered when faced with overwhelming odds. Humans did none of these things. The collective mind analyzed thousands of combat reports streaming in from across the battle zone. Human vessels were fighting while missing entire sections of their hulls. Crews were continuing to operate weapons systems while their ships burned around them. Fighters were executing attack runs that had statistical survival rates of 0 and somehow succeeding. This behavior is illogical, the Hive Queen processed through her vast network of ships. These biological entities should have ceased resistance after the first exchange of fire. But the reports kept coming. Human ships that should have been destroyed were still fighting. Crews that should have been dead were still transmitting battle reports. The entire human fleet was behaving like a force of nature rather than a military organization. Dr. Amara Okafor was experiencing the battle from inside the Hive flagship, where she and the surviving crew of the Iron Dawn had been held prisoner. For weeks, the sounds of combat echoed through the massive ship as human weapons found their targets. "They came for us," she whispered to Captain Rivera, who was locked in the cell next to hers. "I can't believe they actually came." Rivera smiled. Through his injuries, the Hive had spent weeks studying him and his crew, trying to understand how humans could survive on a death world. Now they were getting a practical demonstration. "Elena," he called to Communications Officer Vasquez, "can you still access the ship's systems with that device you built?" Vasquez held up a small tool she had constructed from components scavenged during their imprisonment. The Hive's security systems were designed to contain logical, predictable prisoners. They had never dealt with humans who could turn anything into a weapon or escape tool. "I can get us to the communication array," she replied. "If we can send tactical data to our fleet, it might help them target the ship's weak points." Rivera nodded. It was time for the Iron Dawn's crew to rejoin the fight. Outside the flagship, the battle continued to evolve in ways the Hive had never experienced. Human crews were learning and adapting to alien technology in real time, finding weaknesses that had never been exploited before. They fought with the stubborn persistence of a species that had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and countless natural disasters. The Hive Collective was beginning to understand that they had encountered something unprecedented, a species forged by a world so hostile that it had created the ultimate survivors. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in millions of years, the Hive was discovering what it felt like to be prey. The final battle for the Hive's central stronghold began when Admiral Thompson's fleet emerged from hyperspace around a construct that defied description. Built from the remains of hundreds of consumed worlds, the massive station stretched across space like a metallic cancer. Its surface was covered with the twisted remains of cities, forests, and oceans, all compressed and reshaped into weapons and defenses. Thompson stood on the bridge of the unbreakable, looking at something that represented the death of countless civilizations. Every piece of metal in that structure had once been part of a living world. Every energy conduit had been built from resources stolen from species that no longer existed. "This ends today," she said quietly. The Hive Queen's voice echoed across all frequencies, speaking directly to the human fleet with the accumulated knowledge of eons. "Species human, you have demonstrated capabilities beyond our initial analysis. We offer terms of coexistence. Withdraw from this system and your homeworld will be spared. Continue this futile resistance, and you will join the biological matter that comprises our stronghold." Thompson activated the fleet-wide communication system. "This is Admiral Thompson to all human vessels. The enemy offers us the chance to abandon the fight if we promise to let them continue destroying other species. I have one response to that offer." She switched to the alien frequency. "Hive Queen, this is our answer. We don't abandon those who call for help. We don't let monsters continue to exist just because they promise to leave us alone. You want to know what makes humans different from every other species you've encountered? We fight for others, not just ourselves." The Hive Queen's response carried a note of something that might have been respect. "Your species is indeed unique. You choose certain destruction to defend biological entities you have never encountered. This behavior is completely illogical. Logic is overrated, Thompson replied. Attack formation, death world. All ships, show them why Earth breeds warriors. The human fleet moved toward the massive station like a storm approaching shore. But instead of the ordered assault formations used by other species, they came as a force of nature, unpredictable, chaotic, and utterly relentless. Captain Park's destroyer squadron led the charge, their ships weaving through defensive fire. That could have vaporized small moons. The Storm Rider danced between energy beams with moves learned from dodging lightning storms and asteroid impacts. Her crew worked with the kind of coordination that came from millions of years of evolution, on a world where everything tried to kill you. Target the primary power cores, Park ordered, as her ship spiraled around a defensive tower made from the compressed remains of an alien city. Full spread, all tubes. The Storm Rider's missiles streaked toward their targets, but instead of following predictable ballistic paths, they moved with the same chaotic patterns as the ships that launched them. The Hive's defensive systems, designed to intercept logical weapon trajectories, failed to track projectiles that moved like living things avoiding predators. Commander Harrison's fighter wings swarmed over the station's surface like angry insects, their ships small enough to use the twisted landscape as cover. They struck at sensor arrays and communication nodes with surgical precision, but their attack patterns followed no doctrine that any military academy would recognize. This is insane, Harrison called to his pilots as they dove between the ruins of alien skyscrapers. We're flying through a graveyard the size of a solar system, and somehow we're winning. Inside the station, Dr. Okafor and the crew of the Iron Dawn had fought their way to the central communication array. The Hive's internal security forces were powerful, but they had been designed to suppress logical prisoners who would surrender when faced with superior force. They had never dealt with humans who kept fighting despite impossible odds. Elena, how much longer? Captain Rivera asked as he held position at a corridor junction, using a stolen Hive weapon to keep their pursuers at bay. Almost there, Communications Officer Vasquez replied, her fingers flying over alien controls as she broke through security protocols. Their system architecture is incredibly complex, but it follows predictable patterns. Give me 30 more. Seconds! Rivera grimaced as energy bolts scorched the wall next to his head. 30 seconds felt like an eternity when facing enemies with superior technology and numbers. But his crew had been trained to hold impossible positions and complete vital missions despite overwhelming odds. Earth had taught them that survival often depended on doing the impossible. Got it, Vasquez announced. I'm transmitting the station's structural blueprints and power grid layout to our fleet. They'll know exactly where to hit. The tactical data reached Admiral Thompson's flagship just as the human assault reached its peak intensity. The blueprints revealed something extraordinary. The entire massive station was powered by a single central core, a device that had once been the heart of a star. All ships, Thompson broadcast. Target coordinates are being transmitted now. We have one chance to end this. The human fleet converged on the station's core, like antibodies attacking an infection. Every ship in the task force fired simultaneously, their combined weaponry focused on a target the size of a city block. The concentrated firepower of 600 vessels struck the stolen star at the heart of the Hive's greatest stronghold. The explosion began slowly, as the artificial containment around the stellar core began to fail. Then space itself seemed to catch fire as the compressed star began to expand back to its natural size. The massive station, built from the bones of dead civilizations, started to come apart as fundamental forces reasserted themselves. The Hive Queen's final transmission carried something humans had never heard from their enemies before: fear. Impossible. No species would risk total destruction for abstract concepts like justice or mercy. Your actions are completely beyond logical analysis. That's what makes us human, Thompson replied as her fleet pulled back from the expanding, stellar explosion. We don't always do what's logical. Sometimes, We do what's right. The destruction of the central stronghold sent shockwaves through the entire Hive collective. For the first time in millions of years, their expansion had been stopped by a species they couldn't understand or predict. The survivors began to retreat toward the galactic rim, carrying with them a new understanding of what existed in the universe. As the human fleet regrouped and began search and rescue operations, they received transmissions from dozens of hidden colonies and refugee groups throughout the region. Species that had survived the Hive's expansion by hiding in asteroid fields and dead systems began to emerge, drawn by signals broadcast from human ships. "This is Admiral Thompson of the Terran Federation," she announced to the galaxy. "The Hive collective has been defeated. Their expansion is ended. Any species or civilization in need of assistance will receive it. You are no longer alone." Dr. Okafor stood on the bridge of the Iron Dawn, finally rescued from her imprisonment, watching as alien vessels approached the human fleet with hope instead of fear. Captain Rivera joined her at the viewing port, his injuries healing but his spirit restored. "Did we really win?" she asked. Rivera nodded, thinking about the long journey that had brought them to this moment. From intercepting a desperate distress call to leading humanity's first interstellar war, they had proven something important about their species. "We didn't just win," he replied. "We showed the galaxy what Earth teaches its children. When someone calls for help, you answer. When someone threatens the innocent, you fight. And when evil thinks it has won, you remind it why humans refuse to give up." The human fleet began its journey home, carrying with them the gratitude of species they had never met, and the knowledge that humanity had found its place among the stars. Earth's children had become the galaxy's protectors, forged by a death world into something the universe had never seen before, a species that fought not just for survival, but for the survival of others. The Hive collective was gone, but the legacy of their defeat would echo across the galaxy for generations. Whenever darkness threatened to consume the light, beings throughout the stars would remember the day that Deathworlders answered a call for help and changed everything. Captain David Kane sat in his command chair aboard the research vessel Horizon's Call, watching the endless stars drift past the view screen. The ship moved slowly through the outer spiral, mapping new star systems for the Earth Colonial Survey. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. The galaxy was vast, and humanity was still new to space travel compared to the older alien races. Lieutenant Amy Foster looked up from her communications station, her face puzzled. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on the quantum bands." Kane turned toward her. "What kind of strange?" "It's a transmission, sir, but it's using frequencies that shouldn't be possible. The signal is coming through quantum entanglement channels that we can barely detect, let alone use." Dr. Robert Palmer, the ship's science officer, moved to Foster's station. He was a thin man with graying hair who had spent most of his life studying alien technology. "Show me the readings," he said. Foster brought up the data on her screen. The waveform patterns danced across the display like nothing Palmer had ever seen. "This is incredible," he whispered. "Whoever sent this has technology that's centuries ahead of anything we know about." Kane stood up and walked over to them. "Can you decode it?" "I'm trying, sir," Foster said. Her fingers moved quickly over her controls. "The signal is very weak and breaking up badly, but there are mathematical patterns here that look like a universal distress code." Dr. Lisa Morgan, the ship's xenolinguist, joined them at the station. She was young but brilliant, having learned 6 alien languages in just 2 years. "Let me help with the translation," she said. Together, Foster and Morgan worked to clean up the signal and decode its meaning. What they found made the bridge fall silent. "It's from the Threnody," Morgan said quietly. "They're one of the most advanced races in the galaxy, complete pacifists. They've never been in a war in their entire history." Kane knew about the Threnody. Everyone did. They were famous for their incredible technology and their refusal to fight anyone. They had cities that floated in the clouds and ships that could travel between dimensions. If they were sending a distress call, something was very wrong. "What does the message say?" Kane asked. Morgan's face went pale as she read the translation. "They say their homeworld is under attack by something called the Void Hunters. These creatures don't just destroy planets. They make them disappear completely, as if they never existed at all." Foster looked up from her station. "There's more, Captain. The Threnodi say that by sending this message, they might have doomed anyone who receives it. The Void Hunters can track quantum communications across the galaxy." The bridge went quiet. Kane felt a chill run down his spine. If these Void Hunters could track the signal, they now knew where every ship that received it was located. That included Earth. "What else does the message say?" Kane asked. Morgan continued reading. "They're asking for help from any warrior race that receives this. They estimate they have 72 hours before their entire civilization is wiped out. The message includes coordinates to their star system." Dr. Palmer was studying his instruments with a worried expression. "Captain, I'm detecting massive gravitational disturbances moving through space toward the Threnodi system. Whatever is heading there is larger than anything in our databases." Kane stared at the coordinates on the screen. The Threnodi system was 3 days away at maximum speed. If they left now, they might arrive just in time to watch an entire civilization die. Or worse, they might lead the Void Hunters back to human space. "Sir," Foster said, "I'm detecting other ships also changing course toward those coordinates, but my sensors can't identify what they are. The readings are strange." Kane thought about his options. The smart thing would be to turn around and head back to Earth as fast as possible. Warn the fleet about this new threat and let someone else deal with it. But the desperate tone in the Threnodi message haunted him. These were people crying out for help, and there might not be anyone else close enough to respond in time. "Dr. Palmer," Kane said, "what do you know about these Void Hunters?" Palmer shook his head. "Nothing, Captain. I've never heard of them before. But if they can make entire planets disappear, their technology is beyond anything we understand." Kane walked back to his command chair and sat down. He thought about the crew under his command. 37 people who trusted him to make the right decisions. He thought about Earth, with its 5 billion people who had no idea that something this dangerous might be coming their way. "Foster, prepare a message for Earth Fleet Command," Kane said finally. "Full encryption. Tell them about the Threnodi distress call and these Void Hunters. Include all the data we've collected." "Yes, sir," Foster said. Kane turned to his pilot. "Lieutenant Ross, set course for the Threnodi system. Maximum speed." "Captain," Dr. Palmer said, "are you sure about this? We're a research ship, not a warship. We have basic shields and a few defensive weapons, but nothing that could fight something that scares the Threnodi." Kane nodded. "I know, but we might be the only ship close enough to help. And if these Void Hunters are as dangerous as the message suggests, we need to learn everything we can about them before they spread across the galaxy." The ship's engines powered up to full thrust, and the stars began to streak past faster. Kane stared at the view screen, wondering what they would find when they reached the Threnodi system. The message had painted a picture of an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. Something that could erase planets from existence and track ships across impossible distances. "Captain," Morgan said quietly, "there was one more thing in the message. The Threnodi mentioned that the Void Hunters seem to feed on advanced technology. The more sophisticated a civilization's tech, the stronger these creatures become." Kane felt another chill. Humanity's technology was primitive compared to most alien races. Their ships used simple nuclear engines and basic computers. Their weapons were mostly kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. For years, this had been a source of embarrassment when dealing with more advanced species. But now, for the first time, Kane wondered if being primitive might actually be an advantage. The Horizon's Call raced through space toward an unknown enemy, carrying a crew that had no idea they were about to become humanity's first contact with a threat that could destroy the entire galaxy. Behind them, the automated message drone launched toward Earth, carrying news that would change everything. In the depths of space, something vast and hungry sensed the quantum transmission and turned its attention toward the small research ship, racing through the darkness. The hunt had found new prey, and soon the Void Hunters would know exactly where to find the species that dared to answer the Threnodi's desperate call for help. Kane sat in his chair, watching the stars, unaware that he had just committed humanity to a war unlike anything they had ever imagined. 3 days later, the Horizon's Call dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Threnodi system. Captain Kane immediately ordered all systems to silent running as the crew stared in horror at what their sensors revealed. "My God," whispered Dr. Palmer, his face pale as he studied the readings. "The outer planets are gone." Lieutenant Foster checked her instruments twice before reporting. "Captain, sensors confirm. The 3 outer planets that should be here according to our charts have completely vanished. Not destroyed, gone. There's nothing left but perfectly spherical voids in space." Kane gripped the arms of his chair. He had seen planets destroyed before in training simulations, but this was different. When a planet was blown up, there were debris fields, asteroid belts, something left behind. Here, there was simply empty. Space where worlds once existed. Commander Lisa Morgan, the ship's tactical officer, spoke up from her station. "Sir, I'm detecting the Threnodi homeworld. It's still there, but it's surrounded by some kind of massive structure. The thing is huge. It has to be at least the size of Earth's moon." "On screen," Kane ordered. The view screen flickered to life, showing the Threnodi homeworld in the distance. The beautiful blue and green planet that Kane had seen in Diplomatic. Photos was barely visible inside a dark, writhing shell that seemed to bend light around it. Strange patterns of energy moved across the surface of the structure like veins carrying poison through a body. "Captain," Morgan continued, "I'm also detecting multiple alien vessels in the area. They're hiding in asteroid fields and nebulae throughout the system. Most of them appear to be keeping their distance from whatever that thing is around the planet." Kane studied the tactical display. "Can you identify any of the ships?" "I recognize at least 3 different species, sir. There's a Vorthak cruiser hiding in the main asteroid belt, a Deep Star Republic stealth ship in the outer nebula, and what looks like a rock-borne collective mining vessel powered down near the 4th planet." Dr. Palmer looked up from his science station. "Captain, those are all military vessels from species known for their combat capabilities. If they're hiding instead of fighting, whatever we're dealing with must be incredibly dangerous." Kane made a decision. "Foster, try to establish contact with the Vorthak cruiser. Use low-power transmissions only." Foster worked her controls carefully. The Vorthak were a warrior race, proud and aggressive. If they were hiding, they would be suspicious of any contact. After several minutes, she looked up. "I have them, sir. The ship is commanded by War Leader Grimm. He's agreed to speak with you." The view screen shifted to show a massive alien face covered in dark fur and bearing prominent fangs. War Leader. Grimm looked like evolution's answer to a perfect predator, but his eyes held something Kane had never seen in a Vorthak before. Fear. "Human vessel," Grimm growled in heavily accented standard. "You should not have come here. This place is death." "War Leader," Kane replied respectfully. "We received the Threnodi distress call. We came to help." Grimm's laugh was bitter. "Help? Small human, you do not understand. The Void Hunters are not like any enemy we have faced. My ship carries weapons that can crack moons, shields that can stop starfire. Against these creatures, we might as well throw rocks." "Tell me about them," Kane said. Grimm's expression grew haunted. "They are not truly of this reality. They exist partially outside normal space. Their ships are alive, growing larger as they consume. Their weapons do not destroy matter. They eliminate it. Make it so, it never existed at all. Dr. Palmer leaned forward. War leader, are you saying they can affect the fundamental laws of physics? Worse, Grimm replied. They seem to feed on advanced technology. The more sophisticated our weapons and defenses, the stronger they become. I watched them consume a synthesis battle fleet in minutes. Ships that took decades to build, gone as if they were never made. Kane felt his blood run cold. How many of them are there? Unknown. The structure around the Threnody homeworld appeared 6 days ago. Since then, it has been growing. My science officer believes it is converting the planet's matter into more of their kind. On the science station, Dr. Palmer was analyzing the energy readings from the alien structure. His findings were disturbing. Captain, I'm detecting massive reality distortions around that structure. The space-time in that area is becoming unstable. If this continues, it could affect the entire star system. Kane studied the tactical display, thinking hard. The situation was worse than anything humanity had encountered. But something about Grimm's description nagged at him. War leader, you said they feed on advanced technology. What happens when they encounter primitive tech? Grimm's ears twitched, a sign of confusion in his species. What do you mean? Our ship, Kane explained, uses very basic technology compared to yours. Simple nuclear engines, basic computers, kinetic weapons. Would they be interested in that? There was a long pause before Grimm answered. I had not considered this. During the initial attack, I saw several cargo ships escape the system. They were old vessels, barely spaceworthy. The Void Hunters seemed to ignore them completely. Kane felt a spark of hope. Humanity's technological backwardness had always been a source of embarrassment when dealing with advanced alien species. Earth's ships were slower, their weapons cruder, their computers less sophisticated. But if the Void Hunters fed on advanced technology, maybe being primitive was actually an advantage. Foster, prepare some reconnaissance probes, Kane ordered. Basic models only. No quantum computers or advanced sensors. Sir, Commander Morgan interrupted. Something's happening to the structure around the Threnody homeworld. They watched, as the dark shell began to pulse with new energy. Sections of it started to move, revealing themselves as massive creatures the size of battleships. The Void Hunters were unlike anything in their databases. They looked organic but moved in ways that defied physics, shifting between dimensions as they patrolled around their prize. They're beautiful in a terrible way, whispered Dr. Morgan, the xenolinguist. Like living shadows that can touch reality. Kane watched as his primitive probes approached the alien structure. Advanced alien sensors would have been detected and destroyed instantly, but the simple human devices passed unnoticed. They were too crude for the Void Hunters to consider threatening. Captain, Palmer said excitedly, the probes are getting through. I'm receiving data about the structure's composition. It's not entirely solid. There are gaps, passages where rescue ships might be able to enter. Kane studied the probe data. If they could get close enough, they might be able to evacuate some Threnody survivors. But it would mean flying directly into the heart of the most dangerous threat the galaxy had ever seen. War Leader Grimm, Kane said, would you be willing to coordinate a rescue mission with us? Grimm stared at him for a long moment. Human, your species is either very brave or very foolish. But I have seen my people's greatest weapons fail against these creatures. If your primitive technology can somehow succeed where ours failed, then, yes, I will follow you into death itself. Kane nodded grimly. They were about to attempt something that every advanced species in the galaxy thought was impossible. A direct assault on the Void Hunters using nothing but crude human technology and desperate courage. As Kane gave the orders to begin the rescue mission, none of them knew that their actions were being watched by instruments far away on Earth. where military leaders were making their own desperate plans to save not just the Threnody, but every living thing in the galaxy. On Earth, Admiral Patricia Hayes stood before the Emergency Council of Nations in the underground command center beneath Geneva. The massive screen behind her showed star charts with spreading red zones marking confirmed Void Hunter activity. Each red dot represented a dead star system, billions of lives erased from existence. "The situation is worse than we initially thought," Admiral Hayes announced to the assembled world leaders. "In the past week, 17 more star systems have gone dark. Our deep space monitors are detecting reality distortions spreading through the galaxy at an exponential rate." President Martinez of the Americas Union leaned forward. "Admiral, what exactly are we dealing with here?" Dr. Elizabeth Wells, Earth's leading quantum physicist, stepped up to the podium. She was a small woman with silver hair, but her reputation was enormous. "Based on the data from Captain Kane's mission, the Void Hunters appear to be extra-dimensional entities. They exist partially outside our normal space-time, which explains why conventional weapons can't touch them." Prime Minister Chen of the Deathworlders Asian Federation looked skeptical. "If they're so advanced, why should Earth get involved? We're barely 100 years into space travel. Most alien species still consider us primitive." "That primitiveness might be our greatest strength," Dr. Wells replied. She activated a holographic display showing energy signatures. "The Void Hunters are attracted to quantum technology and advanced energy patterns. They literally feed on sophisticated systems. But our technology is so basic that they seem incapable of detecting it properly." Chancellor Miller of the European Coalition stood up. "You're suggesting that our crude technology is actually better than alien superscience?" "In this specific case, yes," Dr. Wells said. "Think of it like this. The Void Hunters are predators, evolved to hunt lions and tigers. They're perfectly equipped to detect and destroy the most dangerous prey. But they're so focused on big threats that they completely ignore the mice." Admiral Hayes brought up tactical displays from Kane's reconnaissance mission. "Captain Kane has confirmed this theory. Human ships and probes can move through Void Hunter territory almost undetected. Our kinetic weapons and chemical explosives are so primitive that the creatures barely register them as threats." Foreign Minister Okafor of the African Alliance raised her hand. "Admiral, what you're describing sounds like a suicide mission. Even if our ships can get close to these creatures, what can we possibly do against entities that can erase planets?" The answer came from an unexpected source. General Park, the head of Earth's Military Research Division, stepped forward with a tablet full of calculations. "We've been analyzing the energy patterns from the Void Hunter structures. They require massive amounts of power to maintain their extra-dimensional state. They get that power by consuming advanced civilizations." "What's your point, General?" asked President Martinez. "If we can cut off their power source or disrupt their energy patterns, we might be able to force them back into normal space-time. Once they're fully in our dimension, conventional weapons should work on them." Admiral Hayes nodded. "The plan is risky, but it's our best option. We deploy the entire Earth fleet to the Threnody system. Our ships are primitive enough to avoid detection, and our weapons are crude enough to actually hurt these things once we level the playing field." The council erupted in arguments. Many leaders felt that Earth should stay hidden, using their technological invisibility to survive while more advanced civilizations fell. Others argued that eventually the Void Hunters would find Earth anyway, and it was better to fight them while they still had allies. "You're talking about committing every ship we have," said Prime Minister Chen. "If this fails, Earth will be defenseless." Admiral Hayes walked to the center of the room. "If we don't act, there won't be an Earth to defend. Dr. Wells has calculated that the reality distortions will reach our local stellar group within 6 months. When that happens, it won't matter if the Void Hunters attack us directly or not. Local space-time will become so unstable that our solar system could simply cease to exist." Meanwhile, in the Threnody system, Captain Kane was learning hard lessons. about fighting extra-dimensional predators. The rescue mission had been partially successful. Working with war leader Grimm and ships from 3 other species, they had managed to evacuate 200,000 Threnody refugees using simple human cargo vessels. The evacuated Threnody included Dr. Kethril, one of their greatest scientists. She was a tall, crystalline being whose body reflected light in beautiful patterns when she moved. Despite her people's pacifist nature, she had been studying the Void Hunters since the attack began. "Your species confuses me, Captain Kane, Doctor," Kethril said as they met in the Horizons Calls briefing room. "Your technology should not work against the Hunters. Yet somehow your simple weapons can damage them when our most advanced systems cannot." Kane poured coffee from an old-fashioned thermal pot, offering some to the alien scientist. She politely declined, not having a digestive system that could process human beverages. "Doctor, what can you tell us about how these creatures operate?" Dr. Kethril's crystalline form shifted colors as she thought. "They exist in a quantum superposition between dimensions. In their natural state, they can phase in and out of reality at will. This is why energy weapons pass right through them. But there may be a way to anchor them in normal space." "How?" Kane asked. "Massive gravitational disruption. If we could create enough space-time distortion around them, it might force them to choose a single-dimensional state. Once locked in normal space, they would be vulnerable to conventional weapons." Kane leaned forward. "What kind of gravitational disruption are we talking about?" Dr. Kethril was quiet for a moment. "The controlled detonation of several nuclear weapons in a precise pattern around a target area. But the timing would have to be perfect, and someone would need to place the devices manually. The quantum interference from the Void Hunters makes remote detonation impossible." The implications hit Kane immediately. Someone would have to fly directly into the heart of a Void Hunter formation and plant nuclear bombs, knowing they probably wouldn't survive the mission. Back on Earth, the debate in the Emergency Council was reaching its conclusion. Admiral Hayes had presented intelligence from Kane's mission showing that the Void Hunters' main structure around the Threnody homeworld was growing larger every hour. If it wasn't stopped soon, the reality distortions would become permanent. "The vote is clear," announced Secretary General Williams. "Earth will deploy its full military fleet to assist in the defense of the Threnody system. Admiral Hayes, you have authorization to use any means necessary to stop this threat." Admiral Hayes nodded grimly. "I'll need 3 days to gather our forces. The fleet will include ships from every nation on Earth. If we're going to fight monsters from another dimension, we'll do it united." As the council members filed out, Dr. Wells approached the Admiral. "Patricia, there's something else you should know. The quantum analysis of the Void Hunter energy signatures suggests they're not the only threat out there. These readings match theoretical models for transdimensional incursions. If we're right, the Void Hunters might just be the first wave." Admiral Hayes stared at the star charts, showing the spreading zones of destruction. Humanity was about to commit everything they had to fight an enemy they barely understood, using weapons that shouldn't work against creatures that could rewrite reality itself. But sometimes, she thought, the best weapon against an impossible enemy was the refusal to accept that victory was impossible. Humans had survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars by being too stubborn to give up. Now they would find out if that same stubbornness could save the galaxy. In 3 days, the largest fleet in human history would launch toward the Threnody system, carrying the hopes of every species that still believed in the possibility of fighting back against the dark. The combined fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Threnody system like an iron storm. 300 human ships representing every nation on Earth spread out in formation, their hulls scarred by years of service and their weapons. Bays loaded with the most primitive arsenal the galaxy had seen in centuries. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship, the mighty dreadnought Earthshaker, watching the tactical displays update as her fleet took position. Her ships carried kinetic railguns, nuclear missiles, chemical explosives, and mass drivers. To any advanced alien observer, the human fleet would look like a museum of ancient warfare. "Admiral," reported Captain Sarah Cross, Hayes's chief of staff, "all ships report ready for combat. The alien refugee fleets are requesting permission to join our formation." Through the view screen, Hayes could see the motley collection of alien vessels that had gathered around Captain Kane's position. War Leader Grimm's massive Vorthak cruiser dominated the group, but there were also ships from a dozen other species, all refugees from systems that the Void Hunters had already consumed. "Grant them permission," Hayes ordered. "But make it clear that human ships will take point. Our weapons are the only ones that have proven effective against these creatures." The Void Hunter structure around the Threnody homeworld had grown even larger since Kane's first reconnaissance. It now resembled a massive black flower with petals the size of continents, each one pulsing with energy that bent light and warped space around it. Strange biomechanical ships drifted around the structure like antibodies protecting an infection. Dr. Elizabeth Wells, who had insisted on joining the mission despite the risks, studied the readings from her science station. "Admiral, the reality distortions have increased by 40% since our last measurements. If this continues, the effect will become self-sustaining. Even if we destroy the Void Hunters, the dimensional damage might be permanent." Hayes nodded grimly. According to Dr. Kethrill's calculations, they had perhaps 6 hours before the quantum anchor plan would become impossible. After that, the Threnody system would be lost forever, and the reality distortions would spread to neighboring systems. "All ships, this is Admiral Hayes," she announced over the fleet communications. "Today we face an enemy unlike anything humanity has ever encountered. These creatures have destroyed civilizations that had forgotten more about science than we have ever learned. But they made one mistake. They assumed that advanced always means better." On his ship, Captain Kane listened to the Admiral's words while watching his own tactical displays. The Void Hunter bioships had detected the human fleet's arrival and were beginning to move. But just as the intelligence suggested, they seemed confused by the primitive energy signatures. The creatures were scanning the human ships but couldn't seem to classify them as threats. "Our weapons are crude," Admiral Hayes continued. "Our ships are simple. Our technology is primitive, and that is exactly why we're going to win. These creatures have evolved to fight gods. Today, they learn what happens when gods send mice to do the killing." The battle plan was complex but necessary. While the main human fleet engaged the Void Hunter bioships in direct combat, a smaller task force led by Captain Kane would approach the central structure. Their mission was to place the nuclear devices that Dr. Kethrill had designed, creating a quantum anchor that would force the Void Hunters into normal space-time. "All units, commence attack," Admiral Hayes ordered. The human fleet opened fire with a sound like thunder rolling across the cosmos. Kinetic railgun rounds, each one a simple piece of metal accelerated to incredible speeds, streaked toward the Void Hunter bioships. Nuclear missiles, their primitive guidance systems immune to the creature's quantum interference, locked onto targets and closed distance. The effect was immediate and shocking. The Void Hunter bioships, which had shrugged off the most advanced energy weapons in the galaxy, suddenly found themselves taking real damage from weapons that belonged in a museum. Hull plates cracked under kinetic impacts. Explosions tore through alien flesh that had seemed indestructible. "My God," whispered War Leader Grimm over the communications. "It's actually working." But the Void Hunters were learning fast. As their bioships took damage, they began to adapt. Their quantum phasing abilities allowed them to dodge some attacks, and their regenerative capabilities started healing the damage from human weapons. The battle was far from won. Captain Kane led his task force toward the central structure while the main fleet kept the bioships busy. His group included the Horizon's Call, 2 human destroyers, and Dr. Kethrill's modified Threnody science vessel. They flew through a nightmare landscape of warped space and twisted physics, following the path that the earlier reconnaissance had mapped out. "Captain," reported Dr. Palmer, "we're entering the quantum distortion field. Reality is becoming unstable. Our instruments are having trouble maintaining accurate readings." Kane could see what Palmer meant. Outside the view screen, space itself seemed to ripple like water. Stars appeared and disappeared, showing glimpses of other dimensions bleeding through into normal reality. The Void Hunter structure loomed ahead, vast and terrible, its organic corridors pulsing with alien life. "Dr. Kethrel," Kane called over the intercom, "are you ready with the quantum anchors?" The Threnody scientist's voice came back clear and determined. "The nuclear devices have been modified according to my calculations. But remember, Captain, the detonation sequence must be precise. Any deviation from the timing could tear a hole in space-time itself." Kane's ships approached the structure's surface, which was covered in what looked like a combination of metal and living tissue. Strange openings appeared in the hull, revealing passages that led into the creature's interior. Following Dr. Kethrel's guidance, they entered the structure through one of these biological airlocks. Inside, the Void Hunter structure was like flying through the circulatory system of some cosmic god. Vast chambers pulsed with energy, connected by tunnels that stretched for kilometers. Smaller creatures, part of the Void Hunter collective, moved through the passages like white blood cells defending against infection. "There," Dr. Kethrel announced. "The central chamber. That's where we need to place the quantum anchors." Kane stared at the massive space ahead of them. It was filled with swirling energy that hurt to look at directly. At the center was something that might have been the creature's brain or heart, a writhing mass of quantum activity that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "All ships, begin deployment," Kane ordered. The modified nuclear devices were more than just bombs. Dr. Kethrel had surrounded each one with crystalline matrices that would focus the explosive energy into precise quantum disruption patterns. When detonated in sequence, they would create a gravitational cage that would force the Void Hunters to choose a single-dimensional state. But placing the devices required flying close to the central mass, and the quantum interference was getting stronger. Kane watched his instruments flicker and fail as they approached the target zone. Outside, reality twisted into impossible shapes. "Captain," Dr. Palmer called out, "the quantum distortions are affecting our navigation. I can't maintain a stable course." Kane gripped his controls, using basic manual piloting skills to guide his ship through the chaos. One by one, his task force placed their quantum anchors around the central mass. But the Void Hunters had realized what was happening. The entire structure began to convulse, trying to reject the foreign objects. "All devices placed," reported Kane. "Dr. Kethrel, initiate the sequence." "Beginning quantum anchor activation," the Threnody scientist replied. "Detonation in 30 seconds. Kane turned his ship toward the exit, pushing his engines to maximum power. Around him, the Void Hunter structure was coming alive with rage and fear. Biomechanical defenses that had ignored the human ships suddenly began targeting them with weapons that could tear holes in space itself. 15 seconds, Dr. Kethrel announced. One of Kane's destroyers took a direct hit from a quantum weapon and simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but deleted from reality as if it had never been built. Kane felt sick watching 30 crew members vanish without even the dignity of death. 5 seconds. Kane's ship burst out of the structure, just as the quantum anchors detonated. The explosion was unlike anything ever seen in normal space. Instead of fire and radiation, there was a collapse of possibility itself. The quantum field that had surrounded the Void Hunters suddenly contracted, forcing the creatures into a single-dimensional state. For the first time since the battle began, the Void Hunters became fully visible in normal space-time. And for the first time, they looked vulnerable. Admiral Hayes saw the change immediately on her tactical displays. "All ships, concentrate fire on the central structure. This is our chance." The combined human and alien fleet opened fire with everything they had. Nuclear missiles, kinetic rounds, and even simple chemical explosives struck the now solid Void Hunter structure. Without their quantum phasing abilities, the creatures found themselves facing the same laws of physics that governed every other form of life. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The quantum anchor detonation had destabilized local space-time in ways that Dr. Kethril had never anticipated. Reality itself was beginning to unravel around the Threnody system, threatening to create a cascade effect that could destroy everything within 50 light-years. The space around the Threnody system shattered like broken glass. Reality twisted and folded as the quantum anchor detonation sent shock waves through the fabric of space-time itself. Admiral Hayes watched her tactical displays flicker with readings that shouldn't exist as the Void Hunter structure began to collapse in on itself. "Admiral," Dr. Wells reported from her science station, her voice tight with fear, "the dimensional barriers are breaking down. The quantum cascade is spreading faster than our calculations predicted. We have maybe 20 minutes before the effect becomes irreversible." Through the chaos, the trapped Void Hunters revealed their true nature. No longer able to phase between dimensions, they appeared as massive creatures of living shadow and crystalline bone. But instead of the mindless predators everyone had expected, they showed clear signs of intelligence and desperation. Captain Kane, limping back toward the main fleet in his damaged ship, suddenly received an impossible transmission. The signal was coming directly from the Void Hunter Collective, broadcast on frequencies that his primitive radio equipment could somehow receive. "Human vessel," the voice was like whispers from a dying universe. "We must speak. Your actions have doomed us all." Kane looked at his crew in shock. "They're trying to communicate." Dr. Palmer, nursing a head wound from their escape, leaned over the communications console. "Captain, the signal is coming through our simplest receivers. They've somehow learned to use our primitive technology to talk to us." "Put them through," Kane ordered. The voice that emerged from the speakers carried the weight of cosmic sorrow. "We are not what you believe us to be, small ones. We are refugees from a universe that died eons ago. We consume to survive, yes, but we do not choose this hunger." Kane felt a chill run through him. "What do you mean?" "Our reality collapsed when the laws of physics themselves broke down. We escaped into the spaces between dimensions, but we can only exist by feeding on the quantum energy of living civilizations. We have searched for eons for a way to end our hunger without ending our existence." On the flagship, Admiral Hayes was listening to the same transmission. The implications were staggering. If the Void Hunters were telling the truth, then humanity hadn't just fought monsters. They had trapped desperate refugees in a reality that was toxic to their very nature. But Dr. Wells was shaking her head. "Admiral, regardless of their motivations, the quantum cascade is still spreading. If we don't stabilize the dimensional barriers within 15 minutes, this entire sector of space will collapse into a reality storm that could spread across the galaxy. The solution, when it came, required the greatest sacrifice of all." Dr. Kethril's voice came over the communications from her science vessel, calm despite the chaos around them. "There is a way to stop the cascade, but it requires the complete destruction of the Threnody homeworld." Hayes felt her blood freeze. "Explain." "My people's homeworld contains a quantum computer at its core that has been calculating universal constants for over 10,000 years. If we overload it with the right energy pattern, it will create a dimensional lock that will contain both the cascade and the Void Hunters. But the explosion will sterilize everything within 50 light-years. The choice was impossible. Save the galaxy by destroying an entire star system, or risk a reality collapse that could unravel the fabric of space itself. Hayes looked around, her bridge at the faces of her crew, seeing her own anguish reflected in their eyes. "How long do we have to decide?" Hayes asked. "The cascade will reach critical mass in 12 minutes, Dr. Kethril replied. "After that, even destroying my home world won't stop it." It was Captain Kane who broke the silence. Dr. Kethril, is there any way to evacuate the remaining Threnody before the detonation? Negative, Captain. There are still millions of my people in stasis chambers beneath the surface. Even if we had the ships to carry them, which we do not, there isn't time to wake them safely. Hayes closed her eyes, feeling the weight of command like never before. She was being asked to authorize genocide to prevent the end of reality itself, but the mathematics were clear. If they didn't act, not just the Threnody would die, but every living thing in the galaxy. Dr. Kethril, Hayes said quietly, I need you to understand what you're asking. You're proposing the death of your entire remaining civilization. The Threnody scientists' response came back immediately. Admiral, my people have always believed that life is sacred. But we also believe that the continuation of all life is more sacred than the preservation of any one species. If the Threnody must end so that others may live, then that is a worthy conclusion to our story. The Void Hunter voice interrupted their conversation. There is another way, Deathworlders. We can help contain the cascade, but it will require us to fully merge with this reality. We will become mortal, bound by your physics, no longer able to exist between dimensions? Dr. Wells looked up from her calculations. Admiral, they might be right. If the Void Hunters voluntarily anchor themselves in normal space-time, their quantum mass could help stabilize the cascade, but they would be giving up their immortality. Hayes realized that both the Threnody and the Void Hunters were offering to sacrifice everything to save the galaxy. She made her decision. All ships, prepare for combined operation, she announced. Dr. Kethril, begin the overload sequence for your planet's quantum computer. Void Hunter Collective, if you're serious about helping, coordinate with our science teams. We're going to try to save everyone we can. The next few minutes were a blur of desperate activity. Human engineers worked with Threnody scientists and Void Hunter biotechnicians to create a solution that had never been attempted before. The plan was to use the Threnody quantum computer's controlled explosion to create a dimensional anchor, while the Void Hunters voluntarily merged with normal space-time to provide additional stability. Captain Kane found himself at the center of the most unlikely alliance in galactic history. Human ships carrying nuclear weapons worked alongside Void Hunter bioships to place dimensional stabilizers around the Threnody homeworld. The former enemies coordinated their efforts through primitive radio communications that somehow worked, better than any advanced quantum link. Beginning overload sequence, Dr. Kethril announced. Dimensional anchor activation in 60 seconds. Kane watched through his view screen as the beautiful Threnody homeworld began to glow with impossible colors. The quantum computer at its core was awakening from 10 millennia of quiet calculation, preparing to solve its final and most important equation. Void Hunter Collective, are you ready? Hayes asked. We are prepared to become what we have never been, came the response. Mortal, finite. But perhaps in mortality we will find the peace that immortality never gave us. 30 seconds. Dr. Kethril reported. Around them, space itself held its breath. The reality cascade had spread to the outer planets, causing them to flicker between existence and void. Strange lights danced between the stars as dimensions bled into each other. 10 seconds. Kane gripped his console, watching as the Void Hunters began their final transformation. The massive creatures that had terrorized the galaxy were dissolving their quantum bonds, accepting the limitations of normal space-time in exchange for the chance to exist without consuming others. Now, the Threnody homeworld became a new star. For exactly 3 seconds, the quantum computer's overload sent a pulse of pure mathematical perfection through local space-time, rewriting the fundamental constants to create stability where there had been chaos. The Void Hunters, now fully material beings, added their mass to the dimensional anchor, creating a permanent lock that would prevent future reality cascades. When the light faded, the Threnody homeworld was gone. But the space where it had been was now filled with something new, a stable dimensional nexus that would serve as a guardian against future incursions from dying realities. The former Void Hunters had survived the transformation, but they were changed. No longer the cosmic predators that had terrorized the galaxy, they had become something unprecedented. Immortal beings who had chosen mortality, gods who had accepted the limitations of physics. Admiral Hayes stood on her bridge, looking at the tactical display that showed a galaxy saved at tremendous cost. The Threnody civilization was gone, but their sacrifice had prevented a reality collapse that would have killed trillions. The Void Hunters were no longer a threat, having transformed themselves into guardians of dimensional stability. "Captain Kane," Hayes called over the communications, "return to Earth with the refugee fleets. We have a lot of work to do." The aftermath of the battle transformed galactic politics overnight. Humanity, the species that every advanced civilization had considered primitive, had saved them all using weapons and tactics that belonged in a museum. The grateful alien races offered immediate membership in the Galactic Council, along with access to their most advanced technologies. But Admiral Hayes made an unexpected decision. "We'll accept the Council membership," she announced, "but we'll keep our primitive technology. Someone needs to be ready for the next threat that thinks it's too advanced to be stopped by simple weapons." The final scene showed Captain Kane standing on the observation deck of a new Earth station orbiting the dimensional nexus. The former Void Hunters had become partners in monitoring the barriers between realities, watching for signs of other cosmic threats. Dr. Palmer approached him with a disturbing report. "Captain, we're detecting quantum signatures from other galaxies, patterns similar to what we saw before the Void Hunters arrived." Kane nodded grimly. The war to protect reality itself was far from over, but now the galaxy had defenders who understood that sometimes the best answer to impossible threats was the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. As Earth's primitive but effective fleet spread out to establish new defensive positions throughout the galaxy, Captain Kane realized that humanity had found its true calling among the stars. They weren't just explorers or diplomats. They were the species that other civilizations called when the impossible needed to be made possible, when the advanced needed to be defeated by the simple, when the cosmic required the human touch. The Deathworlders had become the galaxy's guardians, and they were ready for whatever came next from the dark spaces between the stars.